The 7th of July, otherwise known here in Kenya as Saba Saba Day, marks the commemoration of major pro-democracy demonstration that happened on the 7th of July in 1990. The phrase Saba Saba is a Swahili word that translates to 7th day of the 7th month. The Saba Saba event of July 1990 was the first serious organized challenge to repression through defiance in Kenya. "32 years on, many of the people who are at the forefront of the movement have died or have been swallowed by the state." Going down memory lane to reflect on the events of those days, we spoke to Dr. Willy Mutunga, a public intellectual and former Chief Justice of Kenya.
1990 was the first clarion call for multipartism. That's Matiba and Derubia. They gave a press conference. They said that they would call a meeting at Kamkunji, Saba Saba. So him and Rubia, they went there and said multipartism. This is the time for multipartism. As you probably know, when they said that, they were arrested. The security people went and arrested them, and they were detained. But because the date had been set, people still went to Kamkunji.
The Saba Saba demonstrations heralded the beginning of a week-long urban riot that came to symbolize the determination of Kenyans to maintain their demands for an increased democratic and political space that had been throttled by a dictatorial Moi and despotic KANU party.
The iconic photograph you see of Shikuku and the Orengo on top of a pickup, they were coming after a lot of people, had gone to Kamkunji, and there were battles there, and people were killed. In Kamkunji, there were a lot of politicians. George Anyona was there. There were many of us. That's how call for multipartism, started, and that's when now Saba Saba. That was the day that was celebrated. And in 1997, you remember, that's when again Saba Saba was celebrated. That's when Kepta and Njoya were almost killed at All Saints Cathedral.
3 times my blood have been shed on the streets. Not mine alone, but many people. So we paid some sacrifice to transform Kenya, make a paradigm shift from the state back to the people. I don't say to the people, but back to the people to whom it belonged.
Arguably, the 3 most important trigger events for the pro-democracy movement in the post-1997 elections were the collapsed economy, the succession debate, and the possibility for constitutional reforms. The rallying call was that without Moi, everything was possible. Kenyans' hopes were high after the defeat of Moi in the 2002 general elections.
Mwai Kibaki naapa kwamba.
The euphoric victory was quickly dashed by regression to some of the old ways, including mega corruption scandals. In 2010, Kenyans voted to adopt a new constitution, culminating a process that began as part of the resolution to the violent conflict that followed the December 2007 elections. It was hoped the new constitution will reduce executive power, devolve authority, and guarantee rights to women, minorities, and marginalized communities.
We put a devolution to make Kenya more participatory, the democracy more participatory at local levels. We defined the three arms of government to be completely independent and interdependent.
Saba Saba became the most important day in the calendar of freedom observed every year. Some steam went out of it after the end of Moi's tyrannical rule, but human rights defenders continue to commemorate the day. For the 5th year in a row, the Social Justice Center's working group has organized the annual Saba Saba March for Our Lives, commemorating and building on the pro-democracy struggles of the early 1990s. In 2022, Saba Saba is talking about Njaa Revolution. Over 1,500 people, mostly young men and women, marched from their communities, demanding the government to address the high cost of living and police brutality and guarantee justice for all.
Sasa tuko hapa kuambia serikali ya kwamba Wakenya wako na njaa sana. Bei ya vyakula vimepanda sana. Wakenya milioni 2 hawawezi afford 1 meal per day.
Sisi tumechoka na hatuna njia ingine ya kusema. Kujileta hapa na kuambia live and direct ama korokocho tumechoka.
From Kariobangi, we are here to tell Kenya that the sovereignty power belongs to the people.
Yes!
This is Article 1 of the Constitution. Yes! Inasema nguvu iko kwa wananchi.
Yes!
Watu wako na njaa. Bei ya vitu imepanda sana, maisha imeenda juu. Hata yule mwananchi wa kawaida hawezi kuafford. Na hii message tunataka ifikie president na waendani wake wote na hao wanasiasa wote.
The 32nd Saba Saba anniversary comes at a time of great political apprehension. The country is polarized by the politics of the 2022 general elections. We are on the cusp of economic meltdown and are still reeling from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
In our constitution, we have Article 43 that guarantees the basic right that each and everyone is entitled to. One is entitled to the right to food. Whether you can afford it or not, you are entitled to the right to food because these are things that sustain humanity. We have the right to housing. We have the right to education and access to healthcare. These are basic rights that cannot be alienated from one person. Now it's up to each and every Kenyan now to understand that these are rights that are guaranteed to them by the Constitution and now to rise up and fight for their rights.
It's an important call to tell the state, control, the prices, because it also touches on resources. Okay? If the resources are not wasted and stolen, they should be able to, invoke Article 43 of the Constitution to basically mitigate those aspects.
The Social Justice Center's working group presented a petition to the president highlighting the high cost of living, enduring police brutality and public debt levels, among other concerns.
Tumeingia pale, wakasema wana stamp, watapatia Matiang'i apelekee Uhuru Kenyatta.
Three decades after Saba Saba, the frustration felt by this generation and its children runs deep.
We have in the past had activists who came and raised their voices against the government of the day on police brutality and enforced disappearance, and the activists themselves eventually became our victims of the same.
Human rights defenders still face the immortal ghost of executions, death, threats, defamation, freedom of movement and expression, among others.
We are in black colonialism regime, where you find kama sisi watu wa ghetto, mostly machali wetu, bora uko na dread, umevaa sahala, kuna vile tu lifestyle ukiishi, wataona wewe first appearance yako, wataona wewe ni mwizi, unavuta bangi, ama wewe ni mkora tu. You'll just be harassed with police around. Unaulizwa umetoka wapi, uko na ID, umefanya nini.
Changamoto nyingine kama human rights defender, ya kwanza kwa community wajatukubali sisi kama human rights defender. Unapata kwa community wengine wanasema sisi human rights defender tunatetea wezi, lakini ukiangalia sisi tunatetea tu haki ya binadamu.
Intimidation from the police and intimidation from the community members, kwa sababu community members pia tuko na watu wanaitwanga ma gatekeepers.
Saba Saba epitomizes the struggle of Kenyans to free themselves from the shackles of the politics of balkanization, ethnic subnationalism, and the monolithic politics of us versus them.
Waanzilishi wa hiyo Saba Saba waliacha. Sasa sisi kama wananchi wa Kenya, wale ambao wa chini, ndio tumechukulia hii nafasi, ikuwe kama makumbusho ya mwananchi yoyote yule ambao wa Kenya akumbuke hiyo siku ya Saba Saba, na pia ikuwe siku yetu ya pia sisi kupigania haki yetu na kudemand zile vitu ambao wananchi wa kawaida wanataka ama wanapitia.
32 years since the initial Saba Saba rally, the changing faces of the famous day remains the mosaic of young human rights defenders drawn from Dandora, Mathare, Kayole, Githurai, Kamukunji, and Mukuru.
Every struggle tells you, when you look at Mau Mau, you look at the KPU or Second Liberation, there is always a leadership that mobilizes people around the issue they care about. The only thing we have to do is to sustain them. And we cannot sustain them unless we link social movements and other movements to a specific alternative political leadership that is discussing politics of issues.
Katiba ikitekelezwa, kila mtu atapata haki yake na tutaweza kusonga mbele vizuri kama nchi.
Implement the constitution because jobs belong to the people, country belongs to the people, everything to the people, not to the politicians.
As we commemorate the 32nd Saba Saba Day, I ask you to self-reflect on how you're honoring the sacrifice of those that came before us and what you're contributing to make our country better for yourself and those to come.